everyone, welcome to another video. So in this video, we'll try and understand the implications of GST on import of services. And to begin the discussion, let's take the help of a simple example. Say you have an architecture firm in the US by the name Perkins and Will. Perkins and Will is one of the well-known architecture firms in the world. And in this particular example, say it is providing a service to India in two situations. One, Perkins & Will is providing an architecture service from the US to an Indian company or a company in India, let's say for renovation of its main office or its branch office. And in the second situation, this particular architecture firm in the US is providing service to a CEO of the same company in India, let's say for the renovation of his house or for a personal purpose. So the idea or the objective of this video is to understand the GST implications in these two situations. But before we do that, let's first try to understand when to call a service an import of service under GST. Now, for this to happen, you need to follow certain conditions. What are the conditions? When do you call a service to be an import of service? Some conditions are in place. Number one, the supplier should be outside India. In this particular case, it is in the US. The supplier being Perkins & Will is in the US. The recipient should be in India. Yes, the Indian company as well as the CEO of the Indian company is in India. The place of supply should also be in India. So if these three conditions are met, then the service will be called an import of service. Now, supply is understood, recipient is understood. Now, what do you mean by the place of supply, and when do you say place of supply is in India? So to understand place of supply under GST, for import of services, let's take the help of the same example. So place supply or POS in GST, when either of the supplier or recipient is outside India, the general rule says that it is always the location of the recipient. So what GST rules of place supply POS says that if either the supplier or the recipient is located outside India, in this particular case, the supplier is outside India, then in that particular case, for those type of transactions, always the place supply will be the location of the recipient itself, which in this particular example is India. So if all the three conditions are satisfied, supplier's location outside India, recipient's location in India, and POS or place supply in India, then this service will be called first an import of service. Once it's called an import of service, then under GST, it is tagged under the category of an interstate supply. And obviously, when you say interstate supply, IGST levy comes into the picture and not CGST or SGST. Because both CGST and SGST is for intrastate supplies and not interstate supplies. But before we find out when to pay IGST and leviability of IGST and all that, it is again important to understand whether import of service will in all situations or at all times will be a taxable service or a non-taxable service. So to understand the taxability of import of service, we have a flow chart here. Now for importing services, you could have two situations. In the first situation, you are importing services for a payment or considerations flowing from the recipient to the supplier. In that case, whether or not it is for a business purpose, it will always be a taxable service. So services being imported from a supplier outside India by a recipient in India for a payment or consideration flowing in from recipient to supplier, whether or not it is for a business or commercial use, will always be tagged as a taxable supply. In the second scenario, let's say there is no payment flowing in from recipient to supplier. It is free of cost. Say you are importing services from a known person, head office to branch office, or from your family to, from your father, mother, son, or daughter to India from your related parties. In that case, you check whether business is there or not. So if you're importing service from a related person without any payment, but it is for a business purpose, then in that case, it is a taxable service. But if you're importing service from an unrelated person, even though it is for business, it is a non-taxable service. So if there's no payment or consideration flowing in from recipient to supplier for import of service, And if it is not for a business use, it is not a taxable service. If there's no consideration but it is for a business use, then you check whether it is from a related person or an unrelated person. If it is from a related person, then yes, it is taxable. But if it is from an unrelated person, then it is not a taxable service. So once you find out whether it is a taxable or a non-taxable service, the import of service, then you look at the leviability of IGST, and then you say, and then finally you find out on whose head IGST is leviable, whether supplier is liable to pay or recipient is liable to pay. So first find out whether this transaction tantamounts to an import of service, then find out whether import of service is a taxable service or a non-taxable service, and then you find out whether IGST will be levied or not. So the last question to understand is basically whether IGST will be chargeable on all situations, and who, if so, then who will pay IGST? Whether supplier is bound to pay in US, from US to India, he has definitely pay IGST to the Indian government, or will the company in India itself be liable to pay IGST to the government? So let's understand this. So this, taking the same example, the supplier in this case is USA, and that is understood. The recipient is in India. The place of supply is India, as understood before, and therefore this, with these three conditions, you can call this service as an import of service. Now this is for payment. Let's say the Indian company is definitely paying Perkinsonville whatever dollars it is charging, so there is consideration involved, there's payment involved, and therefore it is a taxable import of service transaction. It is interstate because the place supply is in India, the location of supply is outside India. One of them is outside India, and therefore it is interstate. Import of service will always be called an interstate supply, and IGST will be leviable. But the question is, who will now pay IGST? IGST is leviable, but who will pay IGST is a question. Will supplier pay or recipient pay? Now, in this particular situation, under GST, it is said that the supplier will not pay GST because it is a totally unrelated party. The recipient or the company in India will be liable to pay IGST under reverse charge basis. Normally under GST, the supplier supplying services or goods will collect GST from the recipient and pay GST to the government on forward charge basis. But in this particular specific scenario where you have importer services coming into picture, the supplier is not responsible. The recipient, who is in India, will have to pay GST to the government. Though he is a recipient, he will have to pay IGST to the government under reverse charge basis. Now, taking the second leg of the same example, we had Perkinsonville being the architecture firm in the US, providing services to the CEO of the same company in India. So the CEO in India is importing services from Perkinsonville in the US. The question is, will the CEO, and this is for his personal use or for the, let's say, the renovation of his house or interior decoration of his house or whatever, the question is whether this particular CEO will be liable to pay IGST like how it was for the Indian company under reverse charge basis. Well, in this particular case, the supplier is in US, the recipient is in India, the place supply in this particular case is India, therefore it is import of service, condition number one or criteria number one. Criteria number two, whether it is a taxable service, yes, there is payment flowing in from the recipient to the supplier, whether or not it is for his personal use or business use, there's consideration flowing, therefore it is a taxable service. It is an interstate supply because you have supplier outside India, recipient in India, place supply in India, and therefore it is an interstate supply, therefore IGST is leviable. But the question is whether IGST will be paid, should be paid or not. So in this particular case, what the government or what the law says is that yes, it is import of service, yes, it is a taxable service, but by way of a specific notification, it is an exempt service, which basically means that in this particular transaction, the recipient is exempt from paying IGST to the government because he is an individual importer of service and he is using it for his, not for his business or commercial use. So under GST, if services are being imported from a supplier outside India by a recipient in India, though it amounts to import of service, though it is a taxable service, the recipient is exempt from paying IGST under reverse charge basis, or he will not have to pay IGST at all because he's using the service for his non-business, non-commercial, only for his personal use. And therefore, this will be an exempt service. Unlike in the previous situation, the Indian company had to pay IGST under reverse charge basis. The next question comes with regards to registration. Well, in the previous example, we took the example of the Indian company availing service from Perkins and Will, an architecture firm in the US. Now, let's say for example, this company in India is unregistered. It does not have a GST number at all, but it is using it for its commercial purpose. Definitely, it is importing service for renovation of its office, whether it's main office or branch office. Let's assume that it does not have a GST registration. It is bound to pay reverse GST under reverse charge, but it does not have a registration. What the law says is that for the purpose of paying IGST under RCM or reverse charge basis, this Indian company located in India will have to obtain a mandatory registration under GST. It has to get a GST identification number. Then in its return, it has to pay IGST under reverse charge basis. So in a case where the recipient is importing services for a business commercial use, the recipient does not have a GST registration, it is imported service, it is taxable, IGST will be levied, IGST will have to be paid by the recipient on reverse charge basis. The recipient, for that particular purpose of paying IGST and reverse charge, will have to obtain a registration under GST and then pay the IGST by way of filing of its returns. So that is the clause regarding registration. Well, I hope I was able to make things clear in this particular video. If you like the video, you could show support to us by hitting the like button. If you want more videos like these on a regular basis through your notifications, you could also think of hitting on the subscribe button. Till then, I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care and thank you.